This is the Spectrum News New York 1 Community Calendar featuring upcoming events from around the 5 boroughs. It's 9 o'clock. 1-800-GOT-JUNK for home or office junk removal. We make junk disappear.
We had MTA Chairman Janno Lieber on the program earlier this morning. We're going to play the interview in its entirety for you in a few minutes. A couple of things that stood out for me. One was this discussion about what do you do with this $6 billion? And essentially he said you do what we would have done with the money if people had paid it in fares if we were at full ridership.
Because they have maintained as much as they can full service, even though people weren't paying those fares and riding the trains. And
then the other thing you asked him about was the reductions in service we've seen because of the crew COVID quarantines.
Yeah, and he sounds optimistic about a path forward, that sick outs have been down, and so they might be able to start getting some more crews back.
Yeah, hopefully soon. Again, that interview coming up in a moment, but first to Eric and the forecast.
Well, you may be able to save yourself a couple of minutes this morning because you don't have to bundle up quite as much as you did the last couple of days. It's not as cold this morning. There's not as much wind, and it'll feel a lot better by this afternoon. A mix of sun and clouds. The clouds will increase this evening, but temperatures are not going to be all that cold even into this evening, hovering around 40 degrees. Looking at the satellite, scattered clouds with us. There were some flurries northwest of the city. Those have passed us off to the north. There's still some flurries in upstate New York, and we're watching one system that's going to dive south and really open the floodgates for another Arctic blast that's going to arrive as we head into Friday night and Saturday. And then our attention shifts to a coastal storm later in the weekend that will be developing. This is the latest American GFS model, and we have seen a gradual shift in the track with the American model toward the east. This is about where we think the area of low pressure will be based on the American GFS model. But when you look at the European model for the exact same time, that is a little bit more west. And that slight change is going to really have a huge consequences to what type of precipitation falls. Here's another more simple way to look at it. The two different tracks. There's an eastern track and a western track. If it ends up with a western track, we're talking about more in the way of rain. An eastern track would favor more in the way of snow. And there has been a trend toward the east. There's going to be plenty of cold air in place. Look at the weekend temperatures, 23 Saturday, 30 on Sunday. So I think at the very least, this is going to start off as snow, and then maybe we'll see a change over to rain, some heavy precipitation, and some strong winds on Monday.
Still ahead, my conversation with MTA Chairman Janno Lieber. That's just a couple of minutes away. But first, here's Anthony with today's top stories.
Pat, thanks. Good morning, everyone. Here's a look at what's happening. Police still searching for the suspect in connection with a carjacking that was caught on camera. It happened during rush hour in Hell's Kitchen yesterday. Take a look at the wild video. This is Broadway and West 57th Street. Cops say the suspect used a taser on the owner of the Audi, although it did not appear to work. The suspect drove off in the car and crashed into multiple vehicles. Police say they chased after the car, and one officer hurt his hip trying to get to the suspect through the driver door. The man eventually ditched the car and fled into a nearby subway station. The officer was taken to the hospital but is expected to be okay. In other news, 2 of the 8 children who died in Sunday's Bronx apartment building fire were remembered yesterday. A funeral for a 12-year-old boy and his 5-year-old sister was held at the Timbuktu Islamic Center in Harlem. Other funerals are expected to happen later this week at the Cultural Islamic Center of the Bronx. Many of the victims will be buried in the New York area, but some may be flown back to their native Gambia for burial. And police are searching for a suspect after a gun was fired inside an MTA bus. This happened yesterday afternoon in the Bronx. Police say the suspect was harassing a teenager on the bus and took out a gun. The teen called his uncle to pick him up. When he arrived, the suspect began to physically fight with him. During the struggle, the gun was fired. No one was hurt. I'm Anthony Pascal, and that is a look at your top stories for now.
The MTA is getting $6 billion from Washington, the largest single federal grant in transit history that completes a $14 billion allocation through the COVID relief bills passed by Congress. It'll go toward the city's subways and buses, as well as Long Island Railroad and Metro North. Senator Schumer announced this yesterday, saying this is money that will help the MTA bounce back from the pandemic.
The subway system, in short, has been saved from its once COVID-catalyzed brink of death and has now been given new life despite Omicron, because the money will be there for the subway.
Here are some of the things Schumer said the MTA will be able to use the money for in the capital plan and for operating expenses to upgrade and modernize signals, to improve stations and accessibility, and to expand the Second Avenue subway. Jano Lieber is the acting chair of the MTA with me this morning. Jano, thank you for being here.
Good to be with you, Pat.
It's obviously great news that you have this money available to you that'll help you to maintain service and improve service. What do you see as the priority for this money?
Well, the first thing is that everybody needs to remember that when the pandemic was at its worst in the spring of 2020, we kept running 100% service, even when we were down to 10% of our passengers. And we've kept going, running very, very robust service right through the pandemic, even though obviously we took an economic hit for that. That's because we wanted to support New York's comeback. That continues to be our #1 priority. This money is going to help offset the economic hit that the MTA took as a result of running service when there were almost no passengers. And it allows us not to have to steal from the capital program and stop doing the kind of improvements that everybody wants. New signals, ADA stations, new train cars, new rolling stock. We need to keep doing all that, so we don't want to steal that money to offset the economic hit from COVID.
So those projects are entirely on track, mostly on track? What's the status of those bigger, longer-term projects?
You know, good news. Thanks to Senator Schumer and the New York delegation and Governor Hochul, who intervened to make sure this money could flow promptly. We are now we kicked the capital program into gear. We are, at the end of 2021, going to be able to celebrate having one of the best years ever in terms of getting new projects started to rebuild and improve the subway system and our bus system and our commuter rail system. So we had a great year, but it was only possible because we knew this money was coming from Washington to offset the economic hit from running all that service while the ridership was so far down.
Jano, it's Jamie Stelter. I do the Rail and Road Report here every morning, and usually,
Hi, Jamie.
Hi there, limited crews are available seems to be the new thing that I say every single day. Been this way for a while, been showing this screen alone just since New Year's Eve every single day. What's the plan? Are you going to use some of the money to do some hiring?
Well, you know, limited crews available was because we obviously couldn't do a ton of hiring when we didn't know if there was money coming from Washington. So with attrition and normal turnover, we ended up short of people. We fought our way back to having about 93% of service available based on the crew shortages. You know, when we had Omicron hit, we took another hit in terms of crew availability, and now we are working our way back to full crew availability so we can put on service. But Jamie, you're the pro, you know this. We have been putting on 90+% of service, even though we were at 30, 40, 50, and finally in December, only 60% of pre-COVID ridership. So the service has remained robust, and we've turned the corner now in terms of crew sick outs due to COVID, and I think we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, so have you seen the same trend that we have seen, that a couple of weeks ago the sick outs were probably worse than they are the last few days?
Absolutely. We were in the last week of December, right after Christmas, we were around 11% of our workforce out sick. We're now at roughly 6%. So the trend has begun to reverse, and we're starting to contemplate putting back some of the limited service suspensions that we did put in place to accommodate the reality. But never did we stop serving all 472 stations, and that's the way it's going to be.
I wanted to ask you finally about this proposal that Governor Hochul unveiled, that she would like to see the MTA take those underutilized freight lines and create what she had called the Interborough Express passenger service that would run up from Bay Ridge, ultimately to Jackson Heights. If something like that is funded, what would the time frame be on a project like that?
Listen, any project of this magnitude takes a few years to plan and to unfold and to fund and to design. But the key is the Governor Hochul has embraced the idea that, number one, we have to deal with transit deserts, parts of the city where people don't have access to the rail system, to the fastest part of our mass transit system. And this proposal does that for East Flatbush and big sections of Queens, like Maspeth and Middle Village. It also goes through, a lot of disadvantaged communities, and it deals with the reality that today there are a lot of people who are traveling borough to borough rather than wanting to go through Manhattan because of the pattern of jobs. This line would serve almost 1 million people living in areas with almost 1 million residents and almost over 250,000 jobs. So it really would be a game changer for New York to have this connectivity.
All right, Jano, thanks for being here. The governor said just a couple of days ago that she wants you to take this job permanently. You're ready for that? You're up for that?
I'm so up for it. I've been in, I spent 14 years rebuilding the World Trade Center. My entire career is in the don't bet against New York business. This is a great moment to be able to lead the MTA and to help New York in that way.
Jano Lieber with us from the MTA. Thank you. A reminder that it's January is just ahead, even though we've got warmer temperatures today. Here's Eric with the forecast.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Well, temperatures today will not be nearly as cold, actually climbing above average this afternoon with highs in the mid-40s. Average high, in case you're wondering, is about 39. Here's a look at the chart. 39 being the normal high. We're well above that today. We'll start near our average tomorrow, and then temperatures will drop. Only 23 on Saturday and a high of just 30 degrees on Sunday. So enjoy the break while we got it. 33 degrees, mainly cloudy skies. Then tomorrow, temperatures do make it to 38 in the morning and then drop as the wind picks up. Wind chills will be down near 0, I think, Friday night into Saturday morning. Saturday, a high of just 23. And then we do shift our attention to a strong coastal storm. Going to bring some wind, but depending on the track, it will either be more snow or rain, and it's sort of leaning toward the rainy side of things. A more detailed look at that coming up in just a little bit.
Up next on Mornings at 1, it is a potential shift in sports broadcasting. Apple in talks with Major League Baseball about becoming a streaming home for games next season. Annika has more on that coming up in Money on 1. This is the newest Barbie. Barbie is honoring journalist and activist Ida B. Wells. The doll, the latest edition in what Barbie has called the Inspiring Women series.
I think actually we might have some of these. Wells was born into slavery. Throughout her life, she exposed racism, brought to light stories of injustice, also a suffragist and co-founder of the NAACP.
Barbie doll, as seen there, will be available on Monday. The price of renting an apartment in Manhattan has reached its highest level ever for a December. Annika's running through the latest numbers here.
Not good news for those looking to rent an apartment these days. This price jump, by the way, came as the number of available apartments plunged, and also landlords decided it was time to start hiking prices. In many cases, they did so by double digits on a percentage basis. The report from Douglas Elliman and Miller Samuel shows that the net effective median rent, which is the median rent including discounts, was up 21% over last year, reaching just below $3,400. The average apartment rent in Manhattan, $4,440. in December. And average rents are now higher than they were prior to the pandemic. So this comeback in prices is really especially astounding if you look at where the market was just a year ago. There were more than 25,000 apartments for rent in Manhattan. Now there are fewer than 5,000 available. The vacancy rate a low 1.7%. That has contributed to overall leasing activity dropping 40% in December compared with last year. And the surge in demand really created this quick drop in supply. Inventory plummeted 81% in December 2021 compared with December 2020, according to the report. And interestingly, one factor that they point to, a lot of the demand driven by college graduates getting new jobs and moving to Manhattan and snatching up all that availability.
Which starts to fit with the fact pattern of the fact that these college graduates are getting bigger money offers than they have before. Every business is saying we've got people leaving, we can't get enough people in the door to replace them, and maybe that's fueling a shift, because it's a dramatic change from barely a year ago.
Oh yeah, and they came as the mayor was saying, the city is back open, come, we're opening up, and so they did, and they signed those leases. It is not just apartment rents. Also during December, overall prices heated up at the fastest in 12-month rate in nearly 40 years. The closely watched Consumer Price Index, which measures prices across an array of categories, up 7% according to the Labor Department. On a monthly basis, it was up 0.5%. That was hotter than expected. So the year-over-year jump is the most since 1982 and comes as there's been, as we've reported, a shortage of goods and of workers. And if you strip out the food and energy categories, which are volatile, the core CPI up 5.5%. Shelter costs, like we were just talking about, make up nearly a third of the total. They were up 4.1%. That's nationwide, and the fastest pace since February 2007. And then another notable category that we've discussed is used vehicles, up 37% from a year ago, and they were even expensive then. One area where prices actually fell was the energy category, which is basically the Fed is just keeping an eye on this because the expectation now to tame inflation is that they will raise rates this year coming up in March. And then also Apple reportedly in talks with Major League Baseball to acquire the rights to its weekday package that showcases regular season games on Mondays and Wednesdays. This according to published reports. If a deal goes through, it would be a major content addition to Apple TV Plus. Its streaming service. The rights are not exclusive. The games can still or could still be aired on regional sports networks for the teams that are playing. But this would be, of course, a big step with Apple, and it comes after Amazon has gotten a foothold in live sports with that recent billion-dollar deal to air Thursday Night Football.
And just breaks the mindset a little bit that the sports programming is always on the traditional sports networks.
Yes, and it breaks the mind that Apple only sells iPhones and Apple Watches. I mean, they've really expanded.
When we come back with more of Mornings at 1, can we turn tragedy into needed change? Our digital reporter Ari Feldman joins me. He's been looking into changes that might help improve quality of life and ultimately improve fire safety in buildings around the city. This is Mornings on 1.